Good morning and a very warm welcome to each and every one of you. It is lovely to see so many bright and smiling faces early on in the morning, and some of you were also here yesterday at the Island Resilience Summit. What an honor for me to be here with the Prime Minister of Tonga, who I've happened to know for a couple of years now. And of course, to have this fireside conversation, but we've thought of doing it a little bit differently and involving you guys in the conversation as well. It's not every day that you get to chat to a Prime Minister. And I would like to pass on that opportunity that I have and sort of open it up for maybe a couple of questions from the audience. So I'll kick us off. And then if there's anyone in the audience that has a question, I do have a timer in front of me, so we might not be able to take too many questions. So if you can think of your question already, maybe write it down so it can be brief and concise. And yeah, we'll go from there. But before we open up to the audience, Prime Minister, you spoke about Tonga, your love for the oceans, the whales, the sharks. Can you tell us a little bit on, of course, I mean, we all know the oceans are important. We all know that we need to protect the biodiversity, not just on land, but also on water. Can you tell us a little bit, paint us a picture on what life in Tonga looks like? For most of us living in big countries like these, the ocean is, especially in Texas, the ocean is far, far away. And if we do, it's potentially by the beach, you know, sitting, taking pictures and sunbathing. So what does life living in the ocean really mean for you?
Thank you. Hita, life in the oceans in the Pacific is isolated. So Tonga is an archipelago island made up of coral islands and volcanic islands spread across 700 square kilometers south to north. To go from one island to the other, it takes about 2 hours to go from the capital island to the northernmost island on a small twin-otter plane, Islander propeller plane. No jets can land because the airport's too small. We currently have one international airport, so we are 5 hours from Sydney, 2.5 hours from Auckland, New Zealand, 1.5 hours from Fiji. And those are the only international connections. So I'm trying to paint a picture of how isolated we are. And to go from Tonga, which is in the South Pacific, to somewhere like Palau, which is in the Northern Pacific, it takes about 72 hours. And you have to go through like Australia, Taiwan, or Korea, or you go the other way, you go through LA or Hawaii and then take an island hopper. So the Pacific is very vast, and there's a lot of distance to cover, and there's nothing but ocean. And the features that Tonga have are not unique to Tonga. This is pretty much the same conditions across all the islands in the Pacific. Apart from the heavily developed ones like Hawaii, Papua New Guinea, Australia, New Zealand, they don't really count. Everyone else has narrow economic base, limited connectivity, and you know, the cost of importing everything into the islands is impacted by the cost of freight. So the conflict in the Middle East, the increase in prices because of the Strait of Hormuz, that impacts the cost of living, inflation, freight, the cost of bringing everything in. And we have to import our power and our diesel to generate electricity, and that powers the rest of the economy and everything on the island. And so living the island is very dependent on importing energy, on importing foods, on imported flights, connectivity, all of that. And thank goodness we have Starlink, because now Starlink has enabled those in the outer islands who had low connectivity to access Facebook and online services. So we're learning to live in this interconnected, globalized world in the islands, but are very much restricted by the oceans. And living in the islands means that we can also rely on subsistence farming, we can rely on artisanal fishing, but all of that is at stake. Artisanal fishing is under threat due to illegal and unregulated fishing. The climate changes in the ocean have meant that fish migratory patterns have evolved and are changing because of the change in sea temperatures. So these are all the impacts that people are facing on a day-to-day basis on the islands.
Thank you. Yeah, I think we can sort of feel how different life is than from what most of us know it as, and things that we take for granted, especially now in the 21st century, like internet and connectivity, flights, phone calls. It's not just something that was easily available for a very, very long time, and still something that, is a multi-step process to get to at some point. So if there's anyone in the audience that is ready with a question, we could potentially take maybe 1 or 2 questions, given time. Okay, we have one there. Yes.
Hello, good morning. I'm from Mexico, and your words, when you were talking about your encounter with the whale, touched me because I felt the same. And now I live in Mexican, South Mexican, Caribbean, and we are trying to protect the jungle. And our major issue was the people who was in charge of the country, president, governor. They were taking the decisions from an office, from a helicopter. And we were claiming, please come and see the jungle. Please come and see the sinkholes. Please come and see the life is here. And they never pay attention. We actually put a sign in the jungle so they can see it on the helicopter. Please come down and see what's down here. Because we knew that as soon as you feel that connection, if you have a heart, it will change your point of view. You maybe say, okay, you know what, this is what we say. We failed. They built a train in the Mayan jungle on top of an white farm. They destroyed, even when the official speech was, we will not cut one single tree, they cut more than 10 million trees. You could tell that maybe it was worth it because the train goes somewhere, goes nowhere. It was just, like a political platform. I want an advice. By the way, I'm a Tonga rugby fan. I'm maybe the only Mexican who knows what's that. I want an advice because I was actually talking with him about this. Listen, I don't speak the language of the people in charge. Clearly there is a bridge. We don't speak the same. So I need to talk with everybody else. So maybe everybody together can force the people in charge to make the right decision. But you are in that other side, and I feel we speak the same language. You maybe can help me to translate my words to the people in charge so they listen. Thank you.
By the way, I struggle with the same issue because I'm the only member of parliament who swam with the whales. And it's amazing because we've had ministers of tourism that have taken that portfolio for many years. That don't know their product. And that just, I don't know. I don't understand. But I've got a story to answer what you're saying. There was there's a bikini making company in Australia. There's a point to my story. So this bikini company in Australia wanted Kendall Jenner to wear their bikini. The Kardashian. Is she a Kardashian? Yeah. And they kept contacting her people, but they wouldn't answer. And the way that they got Kendall Jenner to wear their bikini was they gave their free bikinis to all of Kendall Jenner's friends. And so they infiltrated her network, her close circle of friends and influences. And Kendall Jenner realized that she was the only one who didn't have this Australian bikini. And so she got her people to call the company and say, Kendall wants your bikini. So I think the moral of the story there, or the lesson from this Australian bikini company, is that if you can't go directly, then you have to go around them until they're forced to join.
Love it. There's one more there.
Welcome back to Dallas. Curious about the influence of China and the other big countries to your west and north. And we hear stories about them kind of building their own islands out in the Pacific and trying to influence their economic needs. I'm just curious if that impacts you guys and their pollution that they're releasing from coal-fired plants is going to hit you before it hits us. The plastic that they put into the ocean is going to hit you before it hits us. So I'm just curious of how that impacts you guys.
So the man-made islands or the permanent aircraft carriers that they're building, that's in the China Sea or the Yellow Sea, depending on what you call it. And really on a geostrategic front, this is an affront to what the West calls the first line chain of defense. And there's a second and a third. And so the considerations around that are largely military-like. However, China and their influence in the Pacific region has largely grown because of the attention that they've given us. So one of the largest embassies in Tonga is the Chinese embassy. And they have offered us a lot of bilateral assistance by way of concessional loans to the government. They have availed pretty much like a slush fund, grants, small grants to the communities. They've built a lot of infrastructure, including the Prime Minister's office. So this attention from the East has attracted unwanted attention from the West. So there's a geopolitical struggle in the region to win the hearts and minds of the Pacific Islanders. And Tonga, being as small as we are, we accept all types of attention. And the dollar is the dollar, regardless of who gives it to you. And we realize that only in a collective position of unity can we move the needle. And the Pacific is somewhat divided on this point. Some are more to the left, some are more to the right. However, we believe that it's not a zero-sum game. We still believe in a rules-based international order, and we subscribe to multilateralism. And Tonga has a foreign policy of friend to all and enemy to no one. So we don't really care if you're Chinese or a cowboy. We accept your friendship equally.
All right, thank you. We can have time for one last question. Okay. One last question, if you can be brief, and then we will have to wrap up. Yeah.
Thank you, Prime Minister Kita. Around the world, we are seeing a growing trend where younger generations are moving away from rural life. Many no longer want to work in agriculture, fishing, or land, and instead are drawn to cities and technology in search for better opportunities. In countries like Mexico, for example, this is becoming very visible. Fewer younger people want to stay in rural areas to protect ecosystems or produce food. This is creating a gap, not only in labor, but in connection to nature and responsibility for the land. So do you see this challenge in Tonga as well? And what role do you believe leadership, education, and inspiration should play in reconnecting younger generations with land and the ocean?
Yeah, I mean, this is a global phenomenon, and rural to urban migration is not new. In the islands, it's more like from the outer islands to the main island. In fact, the capital island has about 80% of our population. It goes further because not only do they end in migrating to the center of capital, but they also migrate to Australia, to New Zealand, to America. And we're suffering from the brain drain. In fact, a lot of our public servants, government being the largest employer, are leaving public office to pick seasonal fruits in Australia and New Zealand. And not just because of the large salary that they're offering, because the New Zealanders and the Australians are not picking their own fruits. Even with such high salaries and wages offered, seasonal workers are not found domestically, and so they're vacuuming up a lot of the labor in the islands. And this has an impact on our own commerce and our own development. The direct link with leaving the environment and moving more towards the city is something that I'm looking at in terms of our tourism development. And I think there's an opportunity to leverage on ecotourism, on conservation, to employ a lot of the islanders, to employ them as custodians, as caretakers, as scientific researchers, as rangers, to patrol, to maintain trail sites for tourism. And through a tourist tax, we can fund this by our visitors. So in Palau, for instance, they have what's called a swim tax. Before you can touch the ocean and swim, you have to pay a $50 swim fee, and that gives you a 7-day swim permit. As a local, you're entitled to swim in your backyard. But as a foreigner, when you enter the country, you can't enjoy their blue, luscious ocean or dive if you haven't paid that fee. And that fee doesn't go to the government. It goes directly towards the maintenance of their fisheries, towards the filling up and maintaining the boats for the rangers. And so I think that system, which doesn't exist today, could offer a lot of employment opportunities for those who would think to move out of their islands and to find better opportunities. And I think that there's more job security there than moving blindly into an urban environment to try and find housing, to try and find employment. You can live comfortably on your island and take care of it and be paid for it. And I think that's a great opportunity that we want to work on.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Prime Minister, for answering those questions and for being a sport. It is not always that you get leaders of this stature open to just taking questions from the audience without any prep on what this is going to be like. So thank you for that. And thank you for being a wonderful audience, for engaging, and for your wonderful questions. I think you've done a better job than I could have. So thank you for setting the tone for the rest of the day.